Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Castalia Cocktails. Don't just drink cocktails, experience them. With matching scents and knowledgeable bartenders to guide you, it's a great experience. Try one of their pairings or feel free to go off the menu with an adventure for your senses. The menu both tells you how boozy a drink is, and there is a full non-alcoholic lineup, taking care to give you a top-notch sensory experience no matter how you'd like to drink. Whether it's the intimate indoor bar with less than 20 seats, or on the patio outside enjoying the best Detroit has to offer, Castalia is a great spot for a night out, a drink after dinner, or a date. They're open to all Wednesdays through Saturdays from 5 to 11 p.m. with the possibility for unique experiences for small groups anytime with a reservation. You can learn more at CastaliaCocktails.com. That's CastaliaCocktails.com. Make sure to support the businesses that support us and stop on by. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Friday, September 22nd, 2023. Coming to you from Chicago's Ukrainian Village, I'm Jer Stays.
And from just plain old west of Woodward, I'm Devin O'Reilly.
I think I have you beat for west of Woodward.
Yeah, I guess the far west of Woodward, apparently.
So a couple of things right up front with this episode. I think, first off, I sound a little bit different. You sound a little bit different. We're kind of just throwing this together. I am literally in a flat. There's no sound control. There's no nothing. This is a very kind of raw episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's kind of the best we could do while traveling. And yeah, the other thing I want to mention is that I think we need to put a trigger warning on this episode, Devin.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to hit some topics that might get people a little hot under the collar.
Specifically for anyone named Steve in Commerce Township who thinks that we're going to steal their car or that we're hating their lifestyle or, you know, that like we're taking away their independence. This conversation is going to be a lot about density and real estate and things like that, but it's going to be focused on Detroit, the city of Detroit, honestly, because of the event that I was at earlier this week, and putting things in perspective in a way where I feel like I have to put all these caveats here because every time we talk about anything than the norm, I get a flood of emails that I'm some sort of socialist communist. And that's not what I am at all. But I'm going to put all those trigger warnings out there because I think we need to have a discussion that, frankly, if you live in Commerce Township, it doesn't affect you much unless you want to come down for a restaurant.
Right. There's a lot going on here, Jeremy. You're going to start talking about some numbers and some trends that we're seeing from Downtown Detroit Partnerships data that they released. And yeah, it's not all going to be great, but there is some good news. There is some positives to come out of this. And so let's talk about it.
Oh, 100%. And this is not a negative conversation. This is not a, we shouldn't do anything for the neighborhoods. Like, because everyone seems to view these conversations that we have.
Yeah, you're getting so, well, let's just do it, man. Let's just do it. Let's just tell the people. Don't placate them too much. The listeners can handle it. They can handle what we're going to dish out.
Okay, so this week I went to a real estate meeting with the Downtown Detroit Partnership. A lot of interesting presenters about it, talking about where we stand in downtown Detroit as far as population. And some of the growth that had been happening right before the pandemic has kind of subsided a bit because of it. You still see an overall growth since 2010. But downtown Detroit is at about 6,700 residents right now. And when I put that out on social media, people were stunned. But it doesn't really surprise me at all. And there's going to be a shift, I think, in pushing live and play as opposed to live, play, and work, because they were very honest about things like the pandemic. Like one of the experts talked about how office space is not really going to come back in the next 2 years in the way that some people want to say that it will. Maybe some Class A spaces, but we've got a lot of changes that have happened and we need to kind of embrace them and then kind of look into the future. Another thing this report talked about was a goal of tripling downtown Detroit's population, which I think some people might think is crazy, but I think it's absolutely doable and I think we should even go bigger. That's more of a conversation. Devin, you've been around downtown development and downtown for a long time, as have I. What were some of your quick takeaways?
Well, good news. Population downtown is increasing by 25%. I mean, 5,000 to, 6,500, give or take. You are seeing more people live downtown, but like you said, we can handle so many more. So I think the focus on building more density in the downtown area, more apartments, which again, more apartments, more supply, you put more supply in the market, basic economics is going to tell you that the cost should come down for some of these units. And you'll still have the luxury, you'll still have a $10,000 penthouse, and there's people in the market who can afford that. But you'll also have some stuff, hopefully sub 1,500, maybe even sub 1,000 for studios and things like that, to hit a more affordable rate for people who are working in the city, working in Detroit. And, again, Jared, I think, the trend, it's not super surprising that we're looking at in terms of employment, hospitality, residential, crashed during the pandemic. Of course that happened. And we're building back up. but we're still not to pre-pandemic levels. But we are headed in the right direction. And then finally, it's important to note, you said they're really talking about this live play model, and the work part has kind of been omitted. And obviously that's intentional, because I don't think they're trying to sell downtown as you're definitely going to work there. You might work there, but I think they want you to kind of live there. They want you to play there, experience your life there, and maybe you do work remotely. And so that's kind of a little bit of a shift in the thinking of kind of the live, work, play model that we've been talking about pre-pandemic.
I look at this and see a ton of opportunity. And I see why so many people are excited about downtown Detroit, because frankly, there's so much more room to grow. I know there's been this back and forth, debate, neighborhoods, Detroit, downtown, whatever. But I feel like a growing Detroit, in fact, I know a truly growing Detroit, and yes, it is growth since 2010, 25%. But when you travel as I do, and I'm sitting here in a neighborhood of 11,000 people across, frankly, what is like, not that many square blocks. And it's not like there's tons of tall buildings here. Right? There's like 11,000 people in this immediate neighborhood, and it's not like I'm in a luxury loft or anything like that, right? This is like housing that, I'm walking down the street and there's people just like walking their dogs, and they've been in the neighborhood forever and things like that. So I think the density is possible, and it's possible not everything has to be a tower. And I think that density is going to help build the city of Detroit's finances, because at the end of the day, I'm all about affordable housing. But the reality is, and there was a lot of pushback on the tweet thread or X thread or whatever I put out there about, well, what about people in the city? Here's the deal. If you're making $34,000, $35,000 a year as a household, the housing that you can be built for you that makes any sense has to be heavily federally subsidized. There's no for-profit model that supports that. And that goes into the idea of like, we need to do the power of and, which sounds cheesy, but I think it's a real thing. We have to do affordable housing, and we have to increase people, increase the incomes of residents, increase people coming in, because at the end of the day, growth creates opportunity. And that's maybe one of my most capitalist viewpoints, and I will stick by it, is that when you grow, you create jobs. When you truly grow, when you truly create momentum, that is something that creates more opportunities. And I feel like a lot of times in the region, we're actually shifting things around. Like we're trading from one city to another, and we really need to focus on true growth.
Yeah, you're being very rational, Jer. So, I certainly can't take any umbrage to that. And you're right that we have to grow as a region. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, you look at like an Atlanta or other cities, and they don't really think about things, suburbs versus the city. In Chicago, it's, they don't think the suburbs versus the city. They kind of think of themselves as a region. And I know this has been touched on before, but that's what we have to start thinking about. It's not taking from other places despite other places in the area. It's kind of growing together. And you said it right, Jared, in terms of the housing, we have to kind of meet in the middle when it comes to this issue of affordability in the city. Yes, rates need to come down a little bit, and in some areas there needs to be a better middle market for housing, but also wages need to improve so that you don't need to be making $30,000 and trying to afford a place downtown. There has to be a meet in the middle. We need wages to grow. We need the quality of life to be able to grow, and then residential can kind of meet it by finding more affordable options.
So many residents also commute outside of the city for jobs, and that's another sign that there needs to be more opportunity. That number really caught people of like, wow, that's it as far as downtown Detroit. I want to give people some context. So being here in Chicago, and I kind of did like a little Google map thing about driving, right? Turns out it's about 5 and a little bit of change of miles. Where I'm in Ukrainian Village to Millennium Park is the same distance of where I am in the North End to Hart Plaza. And if you think about the density of those two areas, and it's not all skyscrapers in that area. I mean, here you've got a lot of places that have a place upstairs, a place downstairs, and sometimes a garden unit. I'll walk by places that have 5 units. Like there's a different kind of walkable density that isn't over the top here that I think that we could embrace. I'm not against the occasional tall building, don't get me wrong, but you can create neighborhoods and enhance neighborhoods that already exist, and it doesn't have to be a $2 million place. Like I was looking at listings over here. There's stuff in the 2s in this neighborhood and nearby neighborhoods. In today's housing market, stuff in the 2s is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, density doesn't necessarily mean skyscrapers. It just means multiple units in a building. You can debate how many stories you want to go up, but no, it doesn't mean skyscrapers, but it does create affordability because it's just a simple supply and demand thing. There's not a ton of supply right now for apartments. I mean, there's some, but I mean, we're still pretty low in terms of the vacancy rate in residential, and they're not building a lot of new single family houses. So, we are hopefully going to see that trend where more multifamily units are being built. But I think, you have to remember that there has to be a middle market. What I'm seeing, and we've talked about it, Jerry, is what we're seeing is a lot of these new buildings that are being built, new multifamily residential units tend to go for that higher end because I guess you could say that's where the money is. But I think we need to start thinking about better solutions, better strategies for creating that middle income residential in downtown, because it doesn't exist right now. You have the luxury stuff, you have the real high end stuff, and stuff that isn't even really that high end. It just asks high end prices and is right in the middle of downtown, so they can try and get 1,800, 2,000 a month. And then you have low income housing. And I think people forget there is also still a lot of low income housing in downtown Detroit, particularly for seniors and people like that. So that still exists. So there are those buildings, but there's just no middle.
Yeah, there is the question of amenities, and I understand that. In fact, I'll be putting up a social media bit of my visit to a City Target here in a next door neighborhood to check that out and show people what that is in case that ever comes to fruition over there at, say, Mack and Woodward. That's the kind of thing that it's an amenity question, but I also think what people need in amenities is changing. You and I were talking a little bit offline about this. I'm not talking about people like used to going to the store or whatever, but post-pandemic, so many people, they just order from Costco. They just order from Target instead of going out and getting it.
Yeah, I would push back, especially now, on people who are solely saying that they can't live downtown, or people don't want to live in downtown Detroit or the greater downtown area because of lack of amenities. I really do push back on that because I've lived in downtown Detroit and lived in Midtown. And particularly post-pandemic, the gig economy popped up, and you have Instacart, you have delivery services everywhere. I mean, basically every place does free delivery at this point. I mean, you shouldn't even be paying for delivery for some of these places like a Target, Meijer, things like that. And so everything just comes to your doorstep. So now I live in the inner suburbs, and I still don't go to Costco, and I don't go to Meijer, and I don't go to Kroger. I order all that stuff and it just comes to my door, and it's not any really more expensive. So what I would push back on is say, the amenities are wherever you are, the amenities will come to you now. But what you do have amenity wise is really quality restaurants and coffee shops and culture. Museums, like that's the type of stuff. That's the amenities that I think are most valuable. And when you live in downtown or midtown or greater downtown, you have access, waterfront, like you have the real amenities, in my opinion. Amenities to me, Target, Kroger, those are a dime a dozen. The real amenities that you have, the culture, the food, the dining, the play, that is downtown and in midtown. So I would argue you do have a ton of amenities.
I'll also say this. If you get to a situation where, and I think the couple square mile area around me has like 58,000 people, when you get to that level or anywhere near it, those things appear. Like there's everything you could need within walking distance of where I'm sitting. And it is not that crazy. There's so many bad narratives about cities out there. So many terrible narratives that are just like rooted in politics and not rooted in reality. If you've actually, lived in a true neighborhood of a city, sure, cities have issues, but so much of this is overblown for like a national political narrative. And it's, frankly, I'll just be honest, it's a bunch of bullshit. Like whoever it is, it's just bullshit. And it's amplified. There are areas that are bad. There are challenges. Don't get me wrong. People get mad like, oh, well, the city of Detroit needs to get rid of all the tax. That's not going to happen. Like big cities have taxes. Like you have services, you have to pay for services. Michigan has a weird system where so many places where people live are actually townships, and that shoves off so much to the state. There's just so many things here where I feel like, and here's the thing, and in this presentation, they compared us to various metro areas and downtowns, like the size of the metro areas. And in most of the Midwest, the metro areas are smaller and their downtowns are far bigger than ours. It's part of the goal of saying that it's attainable to get 3 times the population. I think we could get even higher. It's that idea that you have to give up something or everything in the region has to be one way. Look, this region is gigantic. Something that happens in one area, even the city, like you could do something in kind of the old borders of 1910 Detroit, which is kind of where we were the last time we were this population, kind of like just west of Clark Park, my neighborhood in the North End, and a little bit by Belle Isle. And none of those other neighborhoods would have to do any changes. And here's the thing. I know a lot of people want attention in the neighborhoods, but when development things come that way, there's also a ton of pushback. So there's a way to do it. Say, okay, you know what? Those neighborhoods want to stay very similar. Fine. You have a development area where it's like, okay, we're going to go ahead and hit the gas. And then you can have the neighborhoods that keep their character and keep the things that they want to do, but focus the resources. Because the city and this region are geographically gigantic, especially for the number of people we have in them.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Jerry. I mean, I think that neighborhood redevelopment will happen. There's a lot of foundation dollars. There's a lot of, there's even a good amount of private dollars going into pockets of neighborhoods. But in any functioning or high functioning city, any city that's trying to experience growth, the downtown is always still the heartbeat, and we've told to say greater downtown for the purposes of this conversation, but that's still kind of the heartbeat of the city. So I don't care if we're, 25 square miles or 150 square miles, we still need a thriving core where the majority of people are living in the heart, the densest part of the city. That's how we have to kind of structure this. And we won't forget about neighborhoods and other areas of the city, but you have to build that core up.
Yeah, like when I lived in University District, nobody wanted that kind of density development. They've got their houses, they've got things the way they want it to be. They don't really want, you know what I mean? Like they don't see a need for that change, and maybe that doesn't need to happen there. Right? But if you go ahead and focus the resources, and I know that's politically difficult. It's not saying that, one area gets money and one area doesn't, because as we know, like so much of this happens. Like one thing to think about with this downtown stuff, a lot of times people are like, downtown gets all these extra services and whatever. People don't realize that they actually have their own taxing district, much like some other neighborhoods in the city of Detroit, to raise additional money for these services because the city couldn't provide that level of services on its own. And that's not uncommon, right? Like those kind of things are everywhere. And that's just how these things kind of work. And I'm talking specifically about the business improvement zone, because that's how these things work. And that's an extra thing on property owners. And that's just how it is. I hear a lot of criticisms, all these things by people who don't understand how it actually works. And you and I have both been around this stuff for a while. And if you start pulling parts out of that Jenga, you make the whole thing fall down.
I mean, that's a great point, and it hits to the kind of the ethos of the Downtown Detroit Partnership, the DDP. Is people need to realize it's not like it was just created by the city to make downtown cleaner and get better services. The businesses of downtown Detroit pay into what funds basically the DDP to provide those services. So it's not that downtown is getting special attention in any particular case from a broad city perspective. They're getting that attention because the businesses themselves are paying a higher tax or paying into it, or putting money into funding the DDP to provide those services, the extra cleanup. You get the extra ambassadors out there on the streets who are kind of helping and watching over the parks and things like that, extra security. It's not that the city of Detroit is allocating more money to downtown because it's downtown. There's just other mechanisms there. And the businesses, which have a very rooted interest in having a safer, cleaner downtown, they pay into that.
And let's be honest, even with reduced workforces, that income tax from suburbanite workers makes up a huge chunk of the city budget. Right? Like that brings in dollars. You think about the millions of people that come in for sporting events and things. I mentioned this on the show before, but that brings in dollars. And Detroit still desperately needs dollars. Like we need money. We still need money, and we need a lot more money.
Absolutely. I think the trends are trending in the right direction, and maybe they're not going as fast as we'd like to see, but there is room for improvement. There's tons of room for improvement, Jared. I love the idea of just focusing on density. There's 600 people downtown. Let's say, let's get to 10,000 in a few years. Let's get to 20,000 in a decade. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a ton of upside for everybody because I do believe growth creates opportunities. Before I let you go, I want to ask you one thing. In this, they talked about a lot of developments downtown, and I'm sure you can rattle them off the top of your head. But what is one of your favorites in the last year or two that you're most excited about?
I mean, it's a little bit obvious, but the Book Tower is just going to be just transformative for that area on Washington Boulevard, that particular slice of downtown. It is the kind of live, play, and even a little bit of work. It's got the hotel that's also there's residences, there's a hotel, you have the Roost, you have event space to bring people downtown to show off the city. You've got, what do we say, 6-7 bar and restaurant concepts, including cafes and things like that. So that development in and of itself, I waited so long for that to come to fruition, and it had been basically abandoned for the entire time I lived downtown. That is transformative. So that is mine, Jerry. It may be obvious, but it's really incredible what's going on there, and they're just kind of they're still going.
I think for me, and there's actually some things, if it were to happen in District Detroit, I would be excited about, but I'm going to put that aside because we don't really know the timelines on that. And I think downtown is so much more than any one developer, and it needs to be. It needs to be a situation where it's not just one person, not just one billionaire, 2 billion. Like there needs to be a true open market to it. And so I like the addition of Ford to the mix, and it's cheesy, it's basic, it's standard. But you know what? That Michigan Central Station, I'm here. And you know what people talk about? Michigan Central Station. The turnaround of Michigan Central Station will make a global impact for the brand of Detroit and Metro Detroit, as well as my own personal memories of using that station as a kid with my dad, and him saying it'll never come back and it'll be torn down. And although he's not with us anymore, to see that we're going to be able to go do that. And, people say it should be a train, whatever. I'm just glad that it's working. I just am glad that those things are happening. And it's going to be the kind of thing that the world looks at Detroit and Metro Detroit, because at the end of the day, the brand of Detroit runs through Detroit, which sounds simple, but I think it's very true. Nobody, I think that Michigan Central project is going to be the signature thing when it opens, and it will completely change the view of many people about the area.
Yeah, it really will be kind of the crown jewel for that area, maybe even for the city, just a kind of a center for innovation, a center for thinking about the future of transportation. And I know, people have been waiting a long time for that, but I'm promising you from what I know, it will be a mobility hub. I'm not saying we're going to run trains out of it necessarily, but there is going to be improved transportation because of Michigan Central being there, whether it be shuttles, whether it be testing and pilots and getting places. It's going to improve transportation and transit in this area in its own way. I can't say how big because I don't know about all the different projects, but it's going to make a big impact.
Well, if you can do something where you create that density, you can have transit covering 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 square miles as a start, and then prove out the concept and expand out. Whatever that transit looks like, combination of buses, rail, personal mobility, autonomous, I think there's going to be a ton of interesting stuff happening over the next few years. Thank you, everyone, for listening to your Daily Detroit. A little bit of a different edition, Devin.
We hit one topic hard, but it's important. Downtown is kind of what we cover a lot. There's a lot going on there, and there's some great data behind it. So I would just also tell people to check out the report that you referenced, Jared. It is online on the DDP website. So I would encourage everyone to go check it out. You can dig into the data yourself.
100%. And I'm talking with them about getting some guests on about specific areas to do even nerdier deep dives. So with that, I am Jer Stays.
I'm Devin O'Reilly.
Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around town.